The Ottoman Empire was one of the world's longest-lasting and most dominant
empires throughout history. Known also as the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman power was a state that controlled territory spanning across Europe, Asia, and Africa for over 600 years. In their first 100 years, due to their impressive abilities to take advantage of their weaker neighbors, and due to the massive mistakes made by kingdoms of the Balkans and other Christian powers including the Byzantine Empire, the Ottomans will rise from a small beylik to a regional power, and they will use this position as a stepping stone to expand even more. The conquering force began around the year 1299, when Osman I, a Muslim leader from the town of Sogut, Anatolia, styled himself as Supreme Leader or Sultan, following a string of raids led by Osman and his Ghazi troops against their Byzantine opposition. The name of the empire, Ottoman, is derived from the name of its first leader and founder. Osman, whose name was actually Uthman in Arabic, left behind a scarce amount of information about his life, but gave the world an empire in his name. Consequently, due to the lack of reliable contemporary sources about the Muslim leader, current historians struggle to determine what tales have been fabricated over the years and which ones are in fact true. According to Ottoman lore, Osman I was the son of Ertugrul and grandson of Suleiman Shah, both of whom were from the K tribe of Oghuz Turks, although the latter connection has been debated by Ottoman genealogists. Nonetheless, Osman I was the man responsible for creating the first foundations of the 600-year-running empire. Taking advantage of the disintegration, Seljuk dynasty in Iran and Mesopotamia, which was vanquished in 1293, Osman began expanding his territory through Anatolia as the chief rival to the Byzantine Christians. By the start of the 14th century, the newly founded Ottoman Empire began to spread bidirectionally, approaching the Sea of Marmara and along the Sakarya River. Unfortunately for the eager conquerors, their siege equipment was insufficient, making it momentarily impossible for them to capture some of the bigger Byzantine cities and territories, such as Constantinople. It wasn't until 1326 that the Ottomans were able to capture the city of Bursa, which would later be styled their new capital in 1335. Around the time of this victory, the first Sultan, Osman I, passed away, leaving his son Orhan as the second Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Under Orhan's reign, the Turks were now able to start strengthening their power and authority after seizing Bursa, where the tomb of Osman I still remains. As part of his military bolstering, Orhan went to his brother, Alaeddin, for advice. Alaeddin suggested that Orhan create an army of men who were paid and trained infantrymen. This is opposed to the method of the predecessors' armies, which were made up of contingents and volunteers who only came together for the campaign or battle at hand. Orhan enacted this new strategy, but quickly became dissatisfied and decided to look to a relative through marriage, Kandari Kara Halil, for new guidance. Kandarli came up with the idea for what later would be known as the Janissaries. The body of troops was to be made up of children from Christian families in territories that had been conquered by the Ottomans, which would be converted to Islam and trained as elite infantrymen and slaves to the Sultan. Making up the first modern standing army in Europe, the Janissaries were known for their extreme loyalty to the Sultan, ensured by strict policies and rules applied to them throughout their service, such as the outlaw of marriage. While the Janissary troops weren't considered to have truly been established until the rule of Murad I, the introductory steps were made during Orhan's time of consolidation. Also on the mind of the second Sultan was expansion. This became a heavier focus in 1331 with the capture of Iznik, following a few years later by the seizure of Izmit in 1337. And then the taking of Uskudar in 1338. Only 7 years after the latest of those successes, Orhan was then able to occupy the Principality of Karasi. around which time he also became an ally to John VI Cantacuzenus, the later Byzantine emperor. Through this new union, Orhan was additionally able to gain permission to raid the region of Thrace, a goal of the Ottomans, of course, being to capture this area and marry the daughter of Cantacuzenus, Theodora. Furthermore, under the command of Suleiman Pasha, one of Orhan's sons, the Ottomans spread their control to Gallipoli in 1354, despite Cantacuzenus's attempts to peacefully remove them in response to Byzantine fears. The raids throughout Gallipoli had also brought in remarkable rewards and treasures to the Ottomans, which attracted the attention of thousands of Turks around Anatolia who wished to join the empire's forces. Orhan refused to give up this new territory that he claimed was gifted to him by Allah, causing considerable backlash for the now emperor Cantacuzenus, which unintentionally helped lead to his downfall and turmoil within Byzantium. Things within the Ottoman world also began to shift in 1362, following the death of Sultan Orhan, who was roughly 80 years old at the time. His son Suleiman had died a few years prior in a hunting accident, and it is believed that the toll of this loss may have led to Orhan's sudden demise. Regardless, Murad I, another son of Orhan, was next in line to become the empire's third sultan, which he did with a dramatic entrance. Wasting no time after taking the reins, Murad continued the work of conquering Thrace by seizing Adrianople and making it the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. Even with the confidence shown by this swift action taken at the command of the new ruler, the Ottomans continued to avoid an attempt at capturing Constantinople due to their sustained lack of proper siege equipment and the sturdiness of the city's thick outer walls. Opting to stay with a better path for success, Murad kept his focus on easier expansion with more promising results. Over the next decade, the Ottomans captured more and more territories throughout the Balkans, even gaining some of their new control with little resistance after the Battle of Maritsa, in which they defeated their Christian rivals near Chernomen on the Maritsa River. Even going as far as capturing Macedonia, Murad I was now readily broadening and strengthening the Ottoman power across the Balkan region. By 1382, the eager Sultan began to put pressure on Bulgaria, first convincing Emperor Ivan Shishman to surrender his country as a vassal, becoming part of a new policy enacted by Murad in Europe, where the native rulers of existing principalities would remain in their place if they accepted the suzerainty of the Sultan, accompanied by the provision of contingents for the Ottoman army. Seemingly not giving importance to this agreement, Murad and his troops then continued pushing on to seize Sofia, Perat, and Nis. These decisive actions led to the next major victory for the empire, allowing them to conquer Serbia after the famed Battle of Kosovo in 1389. While both armies were severely deteriorated and the leaders on either side were killed during the conflict, the Ottomans still had more troops elsewhere who could be called upon and were granted overall victory as the domino effect of acquiring Serbian principality. Ensuing the death of Sultan Murad I, now under the reigns of Bayezid I, one of his sons, the Ottomans were forced to return to Anatolia and deal with the repercussions of their calamitous victory efforts. On top of restoration duties, Bayezid was also suddenly faced with an increasing threat from the Principality of Karaman. Murad had previously taken some minor steps to avoid the new power, which was built atop the remains of the fallen Seljuk dynasty, from attempting to take his newly seized territories, but that was about all the attention he'd given it. Bayezid was unable to ignore the rising concern by this point, with Karaman moving to the forefront of Ottoman focus after the capture of territory in Germian, Tek, and Hamid. In an attempt to keep his Turkish followers from siding with the potential rivals, Bayezid chose to make peace with Karaman before moving on to capture Bulgaria and finally venture the daunting task of laying siege to Constantinople. In response to the latter act, the Christians undertook a crusade with the goal of defeating the invading Ottoman forces. This resulted in the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396, which was won by Bayezid and his troops, massacring the Crusader army that was made up of Hungarians, Germans, French, and other Christian allies. Presumably feeling confident after the success at Nicopolis, Bayezid and his men returned to annex Karaman in 1397, despite the previously agreed-on peace treaty. The Sultan's reach now spanned across the Balkans and into Asia, making him one of the most powerful Muslim leaders at the time. His goal seemed to be that of his predecessors and future successors: expand. While there is relatively very little information dating back to the first 100 years of Ottoman power, we do know that the period of time from 1300 through 1400 served as a springboard for the empire's growth and prosperity that was to come. The start of the 15th century in the Ottoman Empire marked the final years of Bayezid I's reign as Sultan. In 1400, major tensions began to rise between the Ottoman leader and the Turco-Mongol warlord by the name of Timur. This once Cold War reached a heated climax in 1402 at the Battle of Ankara. While on his way back through Anatolia to confront the threat of his powerful rival, Bayezid was caught off guard by Timur and his troops as they besieged the city of Ankara, withholding the only source of water for the Ottoman troops and forcing them to engage in battle. By the end of the conflict, Timur's army prevailed, while Bayezid and his sons attempted to make an escape. Bayezid himself and two of his sons, Musa and Mustafa Chalebi, were captured by Timur, though the rest were successful in their getaway. Musa was released in 1403, and Mustafa was held in Samarkand until the death of Timur in 1405, at which point he went into hiding within the territories of some of his allies. Less fortunately, Bayezid had passed away shortly after he was taken into custody. It is debated whether he was treated well by Timur and his men or not, but either way, this was the end of the Fourth Ottoman Sultan's rule. After Bayezid's downfall, the leadership of the empire was thrown into complete turmoil. The remaining sons of the late Sultan now sparked a decade-long civil war, referred to as the Ottoman Interregnum. Timur had confirmed Mehmed Chalebi as the new Sultan before he had passed, but Isa, Musa, and Suleiman were unhappy with this decision. The brothers all felt that they themselves were entitled to the Ottoman throne, and therefore did not recognize Mehmed's authority. Suleiman had established his capital in Edirne, formerly known as Adrianople, and extended his power throughout all of Thrace and the southeastern reign of Europe, stretching down to northern Greece. Mehmed centered his control in the city of Amasya. Meanwhile, Isa and Musa fought for control over Bursa, eventually leading to Isa obtaining dominion. This rise of power incited a new conflict between Isa and Mehmed, and after multiple defeats, Isa sought refuge in Constantinople, as Mehmed now took command of Bursa. Not long later, another battle between the brothers ensued at Karasi, now sending Isa fleeing to Karaman. It is said that Isa was later killed after being spotted in a public bath by order of Mehmed. Suleiman, who had backed Isa during the strife with Mehmed, now went on to successfully capture Bursa and later Ankara from the previously victorious brother. For the next few years, an alliance formed and flourished between Mehmed and Musa, the latter being sent across the Black Sea to serve as Sultan to the European part of the empire. Suleiman touted an alliance with Manuel II Palaiologos, and eventually won over the Serbs by the end of the Battle of Kosmedion in 1410. During this battle, Musa was defeated by Suleiman, though the tide would shortly turn once again. Due to apparent temperamental issues, Suleiman found himself rapidly losing allies and support. Taking advantage of the defections and abandonment on his brother's side, Musa found triumph at Edirne in 1411. Suleiman attempted to escape into Byzantine protection, but was murdered on his way, leaving Musa and Mehmed as co-sultans of the Ottoman Empire. Clearly unhappy about the Byzantine emperor's loyalty to Suleiman, Musa decided to lay siege to Constantinople as retaliation. Emperor Manuel, in turn, requested assistance from Mehmed, who made multiple attempts to defend him in a blatant breach of the agreement made with Musa. Unable to stay in Constantinople for long, though, Mehmed had to return to his own territory in order to deal with a mutiny before looking to the Serbian autocrat Stefan Lazarević for help. Now returning to face his brother with new strength, Mehmed and his army met with Musa and his forces at Çamurlu, resulting in a defeat for Musa and his later capture and murder. Finally freed of the constant looming menace of his brother's attempts to seize his power, Mehmed Çelebi became Sultan Mehmed I, accepting complete sovereignty over the empire and uniting those who had been divided during the long-running civil war. Throughout the rest of his reign, Mehmed focused on consolidating power across both Anatolia and the European region. He was faced with several challenges along the way, including a dispute with Mustafa, his remaining brother, who had finally come out of hiding. A theologian and revolutionary by the name of Sheikh Bedreddin also posed a threat to Mehmed's authority, sparking a discord that would last 4 years until the agitator was finally captured and hanged. Mehmed's tumultuous rule finally came to an end with his death in 1421, leaving control of the empire to his son, Murad II. During the start of Murad's time as Sultan, Manuel II Palaiologos made a deal with Mustafa Çelebi to free him from the exile he had been forced into before Mehmed I's death. The Byzantine emperor recognized Mustafa as the true heir to what had once been Bayezid I's throne. But he only found success for a short while before Murad finally ended Mustafa's campaign with his execution. Attention was now directed toward punishing the Byzantines for this unprovoked hostility. In an attempt to do just that, Murad decided to besiege Constantinople, but was recalled back to Bursa after Manuel attempted to utilize Murad's 13-year-old rebellious brother to fight back against him. The boy's revolt was subdued, and Murad was able to refocus his efforts towards fortifying his dominion by re-establishing his authority over the Anatolian vassals and principalities, as well as continued effort to expand further into Europe. Conflicts with Venice, Serbia, Hungary, and other non-allies became a regular occurrence near the end of the 1420s. In 1444, Murad faced a Christian coalition of crusaders at the Battle of Varna, led by John Hunyadi. The Hungarians and their allies were soundly defeated in what could only be deemed an embarrassing retreat. One notable detail of this battle is the fact that Vlad Dracul, the current Wallachian voivode, had sent a small contingent under his eldest son to assist Hunyadi and his crusaders, despite the fact that Murad was holding Dracul's 2 youngest sons as hostages to ensure allegiance from Wallachia. Not much came of this situation until later, but it serves as a clear demonstration of the frequent betrayals that plagued the times. Before the Battle of Varna, Murad had actually abdicated his throne to one of his sons, Mehmed II. Displeased with this immense responsibility as merely a child, Mehmed urged his father to return and lead their troops against the Christian forces that aimed to take advantage of a young new sultan. After undertaking the task and trouncing the crusading effort, Murad went back into retirement until he was required to return in order to quell a Janissary revolt. It wasn't long before the elder sultan was once again forced to meet the troops of Christian Europe, this time on the battlefield of Kosovo. Still following the lead of John Hunyadi, a union of Hungarian, Wallachian, Moldavian, and other allied troops attempted to execute a new strike against the Ottomans in an effort to avenge their previous defeat at Varna. Caught off guard by Murad and his troops, who had intercepted the Crusaders at the Kosovo Pole field, John Hunyadi and his army faced another humiliating loss. Murad was now able to finish out his reign by addressing the issue of Timur's son, Shah Rukh, and gaining command over the leaders of the Churum Amasya region, in addition to an attempt, though unsuccessful, at defeating the Albanian forces of Skanderberg at the castle of Cluj. By the end of 1451, Murad had fallen ill and passed away, leaving Mehmed II as Sultan once again. Mehmed II later deemed Mehmed the Conqueror for the remarkable accomplishments during his reign, immediately looked to complete the task of finally capturing Constantinople, as many of his predecessors had ventured to do. In a ploy to curb any distractions, Mehmed signed peace treaties with both Hungary and Venice, while preparing his navy for the future siege of Byzantium's heart. In 1453, with an army of around 80,000 troops or more, over 100 naval ships, and something the previous sultans lacked: cannons. Mehmed began the campaign that would eventually be called the Fall of Constantinople. The siege lasted over 50 days and resulted in a concise victory for the Ottomans, who now declared Constantinople their new capital. Mehmed also styled himself the Caesar of the Roman Empire, a title that was denied to him by the Roman Catholic Church, but accepted by the Eastern Orthodox Church. The young sultan then captured the final remaining Byzantine states and pressed further on into Europe. In a reign marked by drastic government changes, creating a more centralized bureaucracy and appointing only those who could be loyal to him and his agenda to his court, as well as continual back and forths between his empire and the European Christians, one of the most prominent storylines may be the relationship between Mehmed II and Vlad III Dracula. As previously mentioned, two of Vlad Dracula's sons had been held hostage by Murad II. These boys, Radu and Vlad III Dracula, grew up alongside Mehmed and each developed starkly different relationships with him. While Radu would choose to stay within the Ottoman Empire and serve as a lifelong friend and ally to Mehmed, Vlad became a persistent opponent who fought against his contemporaries' will until his final breath. While some claim that his long-standing strife with the voivode of the much smaller region and military shows a weakness in Mehmed, it instead gives us a profound look at his personality and mindset. Before ultimately pulling back from his attempts to overpower and defeat Vlad Dracula, Mehmed is recorded to have said that he could not take land away from a man who does such marvelous things, and surely a man who had accomplished this is worthy of greater things. These statements from the Sultan himself display not only a level of respect for his adversary, but also his confidence in the Ottoman Empire as a whole during his rule. Mehmed was willing to walk away from a conflict that he saw no near success in, because he was head of essentially two empires, having more or less absorbed the Byzantine Empire, and knew that his power could not truly be stifled so easily. This tone of tolerance extended past Mehmed himself, and can be seen again during the reign of his son, Bayezid II, who claimed the throne after his father's death in 1481. The start of Bayezid II's term as Sultan is slightly stained by a conflict with his brother, Kem. Once his position was secured, Bayezid began to make some changes to his father's policy and put a strong emphasis on domestic politics throughout both the East and West, establishing a more well-ordered system. Though not remembered entirely for the conflicts he engaged in, Bayezid did put notable effort into conquering new Venetian territories and Balkan lands. Nonetheless, the most remarkable decision under Bayezid II to round out the 15th century may have been his reaction to the expulsion of both Muslims and Jews from Spain in 1492. Bayezid condemned Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella I, sending the Ottoman navy over to safely relocate the banished Muslims and Jews to his own territories. He told every leader under his authority that they were to welcome all of the refugees and would be punished by death if they were to treat the Jews any differently than their Muslim counterparts. This extraordinary act led to an increase of new skills, enhancements, and ideas being brought into the empire, which resulted in heightened success for the welcoming sultan. By the end of the 1400s, Bayezid II remained on the Ottoman throne as a well-respected and prosperous leader, earning the epithet of the Just. Bayezid may be one of the more underrated rulers of the empire today. He, just like those throughout the rest of the century, accomplished noteworthy feats that helped to continue the propulsion of the Ottoman Empire and its power into the many, many years to come. At the onset of the 16th century in the Ottoman realm, Bayezid II was already locked in an intense naval war with the Venetians that would last until 1503. Tackling the new century with a desire for further consolidation, the Ottomans, under the command of Admiral Kemal Reis, found triumph by the end of this Turkish-Venetian war, ultimately forcing the Venetians to once again come to a peace agreement with the Turks. While this victory served well for the continued fortifying of Ottoman power in Europe, over in Anatolia, the environment was becoming increasingly unstable. By the year of 1511, supporters of the Safavid dynasty began to rebel against the growing dominance of the Ottoman Empire. Though they were forced to back down after the defeat of their leader, Shakulu. Meanwhile, bitter dissension over the succession of the throne developed between Bayezid's sons, Selim and Ahmed. As both candidates attempted to rally support from different territories and leaders, the Sultan's advisors and Janissary corps began to show a preference towards Selim, concurrent with Bayezid's increasing concern about the possibility of Ahmed seeking aid from Shah Ismail in Persia. Finally, in 1512, Sultan Bayezid II made his decision by abdicating to Selim, who would later have his brother put to death to avoid any further conflict. Bayezid passed away only a month after his retirement. Swiftly upon ascension to the throne, Sultan Selim I eradicated any potential threats to his position by having his brothers and nephews executed, allowing himself to focus solely on any external dangers. One of these hazards came in the form of the Shah Ismail and his Kizilbash Turkmen adherents over in Anatolia, briskly putting an end to a revolt brought by the Kizilbash. Selim then turned to Ismail himself, subsequently overpowering the Shah's forces at the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514. While the Safavid troops consisted of simple cavalrymen, Selim's army, which was upwards of 100,000 men, was able to rely on muskets and cannons. By the end of the clash, the Ottomans moved on to seize Tabriz, which had been the Safavid capital. Then continued toward the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt. Emerging victorious from both the Battle of Marj Dabig in 1516 and the Battle of Radeni